Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brandpie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal business moments. When you're driven by personal purpose, then the focus that you pour into a business becomes so much more powerful. Paul Donovan describes himself as being in his third career, and today his philanthropic endeavours with the Artis Foundation give him the drive to change lives. Paul's illustrious career is studded with fascinating stories of turning around companies and finding his own mission. So join us as we hear his pivotal moments from an incredible journey through CEO roles with ODEON, Arqiva and Eircom. Hello, Paul. Let me get you to talk a little bit about yourself. I mean, what are you working on these days?
Well, Dave, I think of myself today as being in my third career. So my first career was with major multinational corporations from the time I was a graduate with Mars through Coca-Cola, Apple, BT, Cable and Wireless, and then a decade at Vodafone, where I ran a portfolio of 20 businesses and was on the group executive committee for 5 years. So that's career number one, getting to the top of the global corporate ladder, so to speak. Career number two, quite different, as a kind of private equity turnaround specialist, taking really troubled companies and turning the performance around both operationally, financially, and importantly, culturally, to hopefully end in successful financial exits for my shareholders. And I'm part of a very small group of people who've managed to do that 3 times on the bounce. So that was a very interesting decade as if you like, a company doctor. And now I am in my kind of third career. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see that I describe myself as a businessman, investor, and venture philanthropist. And those are really the 3 legs to my portfolio these days. So on the business front, I'm a non-exec on a number of boards. So I'm on the board at Nordic Aviation Capital, which is a Dublin-based global airline leasing business with hundreds of planes flying around the world at any particular point in time. And I'm also an operating partner for Macquarie Asset Management with a company called Arqiva, which delivers the terrestrial TV and radio infrastructure for UK broadcasters like the BBC, ITV, and others, as well as smart metering solutions. And so that's my kind of business activity. Something else in the pipeline I can't quite talk about, but maybe next time we could cover that. And then I'm also an investor. And the other day, I actually kind of went through and updated my portfolio, and I was shocked to find that I'm a shareholder in over kind of 50 early stage companies now, which is mainly in the kind of the deep tech and life sciences areas. And in those businesses, I put money in, and then in some cases, I'm called upon by those businesses to sometimes provide advice or contacts or what have you. And then I'm also the chair of the investment committee at an early stage EIS fund called the Oxford Innovation Growth Fund, which has become an increasingly important player in the early stage funding landscape in the UK, providing capital for high potential early stage businesses. And that's critical for the growth agenda that we need in the UK economy. And then the third leg of that stool is philanthropy, which, as I've got older, has become incredibly important to me personally, and has really helped shape an understanding of what my own personal purpose now is. So to quote my good friend and fellow philanthropist, John Nixon, he says, philanthropy is time, money, and treasure. And, following the very successful sale of ODEON and UCR cinemas back in 2016, I decided to invest a proportion of my payout to establish my own philanthropic fund. And that's allowed me to provide, if you like, angel funding to a number of small but high potential charities, not just helping them to spend the cash, but also to grow. And I've given some of my time and expertise along the line. So So I'm really proud of some of the work that I've done in that space. And I'm also privileged to be involved with the think tank, the Centre for Social Justice. And I'm a funder of the Centre for Social Justice Foundation, which helps to amplify the effectiveness of some 600 charities working with the CSJ across the UK. So that's really important. And right now, I have a kind of North Star project that I'm working on with a charity called the Artis Foundation, where I'm also a patron, where we are looking to transform the way that children learn in primary schools by providing an online platform to unlock the potential of both teachers and children to learn more creatively. And I'm very, very excited about that. So there's a bit on philanthropy. I also am involved in the higher education sector and sit on the governing council at the University of Bradford, where I did my MBA back in the late 80s. And as well as having one of the leading business schools in the UK, Bradford is also the #1 university in the UK for social mobility outcomes, which again is very much linked to my philanthropic focus. And I'm very interested in making sure that we continue to push forward on that. And of course, higher ed has got loads of challenges at the moment. There's lots of discussions around the funding model and what have you. And so hopefully my business experience provides the university with some helpful background knowledge of what people do in other sectors. And it's really a way of me giving something back to an institution that helped to turbocharge my career back in the early 90s. So it's a kind of a wide range of activities, but in those three broad buckets of business, investment, and philanthropy. And I feel really blessed and privileged to have the opportunity to have this third career, which is so rich and so multifaceted.
I'm sure, like me, everybody is sort of thinking like, wow, that's an incredible career and an amazing sort of achievements. And I'm sat here thinking, do you ever sleep and get time to sort of rest? Because that like sounds like such a full sort of itinerary.
Well, it is quite full, Dave. But as my wife says, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person.
Yes, like that. In this podcast, we sort of aim to talk about pivotal moments, and we talk about pivotal moments as those moments where in life or in business, the decision you take really sets you on a trajectory for 5 years of success. And, those are those bigger moments. I'm sure you must have had many, many critical moments in your sort of career when you've sort of taken really quite significant decisions that have set you on the course for success or failure. I'd be fascinated to just, maybe from some of the early stages of your career, particularly as to how you sort of set the trajectory. I'm sure a lot of our younger listeners would be fascinated to sort of get your perspective on the sorts of things that, might hit them in their 20s and 30s in their careers.
Well, so it's a great question, and I often tell people, I tell my own kids, but because I'm their father, they don't listen to me, but others do. But
I know they listen to me.
They listen to you, of course, yeah. But the simple fact of the matter is that I think up until your early 30s, it's not necessarily the company that you work for, or the job title that you have, or even what you get paid, which is the most important thing in terms of the foundations of your career. It is who you work for. Because if you have a really great boss early in your career who is interested in you and your development and gives you the opportunity to gain broad exposure and involves you in the thinking behind decision making, gives you projects that take you out of your comfort zone and really stretch you. If you're then surrounded by a kind of corporate infrastructure which gives you all of the right kind of training and support on the things that you need to have nowadays to be successful in business, that just gives you so many more options for the future. Because early in their career, people now are unlike you and I, who maybe would have 2 or 3 separate but unrelated careers. This could be 8, 9, or 10, given the pace of technological change. And so it's the ability to be agile, to be curious about the world around you, to be adaptable to change, and to have the interpersonal skills to be able to navigate all of that actually can differentiate you as you go forward in your career. And of course, your 20s are a period of time where those are extremely formative. And so, those are the learning and the proving years before you move in really into the achieving years. But unless you've really learned the stuff and demonstrated that you can apply it, achievement later on becomes much more difficult. So an early start for people, which is high quality and which is satisfying, is really important. And of course, the very sad thing is that if you look at all of the employee satisfaction statistics that are out there, huge numbers of people are unhappy in their work, looking for something new the whole time. And, I have to say, I never, ever really felt that. There's probably only one point in my career where I joined British Telecom as an agent of change and discovered very quickly that they didn't want to change, that I felt a lack of alignment and a lack of support from the businesses I've worked in. So, I've never felt that, but I get a sense that there is this overwhelming sense of kind of dissatisfaction and almost a broken contract that young people feel that they have with the world of work and then with society as a whole.
No, I mean, that really resonates with me. I can go right back to my early days at Kodak and go Len Cap, Andy Maguire, absolutely helped me form and figure out who I was.
Yeah.
And I bet you've probably got the same. And I mean, what's your perspective on our generation providing that? Do you think our generation is still sort of mentoring and guiding those younger people? We've got a real duty of care to sort of do that.
It's true, Dave. But I think that there are a couple of things. The first one is that mentoring is an art. Okay, it's not just something you can rock up and do, but spending a little bit of time actually developing the mentoring art and then being able to back that up with several decades of quality experience can be so valuable to people who are at the beginning or the middle of their careers. And candidly, we're not really very well set up to do that. And there aren't that many companies that have formal mentoring programs that encourage their executives to go and mentor on a very broad kind of a sense. And there is a kind of an organization called Step Change, which actually takes business executives and helps them move into the not-for-profit sector as trustees so that they can mentor not-for-profit leaders as part of their own personal development. And we need many more things like that, but it needs to be done on a kind of an almost daily basis. The other piece of advice I have is that if you think you need mentoring, find someone and ask them. It's very difficult to say no if you're asked.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to say no. It's very flattering to be asked and difficult to say no. So, don't be afraid to actually ask for help, because actually giving help is what people most like to do.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I mean, coming back to sort of business and some of the sort of significant pivotal moments in your career, are there any sort of real standout moments in your mind that you go, well, if I'd have not taken that decision, my life would have gone in a completely different way?
I don't think that there is a single moment, Dave, because, so much of what happens to you is contextual to your life stage or the business that you're actually in. But what I would say is that I've always been somebody who's actually been very open to possibilities. In my early career, people might have accused me of being a bit of a job hopper, but actually I was moving in a very methodical way into sectors that I knew would actually help me grow on a personal basis, and to work for people who I thought would again help me to develop. After that, I think the most important thing personally was that I developed a healthy appetite for risk taking. I believed in myself, and no matter how difficult the challenge was, I was prepared to lean into it and take a chance on myself. And at the end of the day, there was a pretty good risk reward ratio that emerged from that, as well as a lot of learnings along the way. Now, everybody's CVs are littered with their achievements. There should be a box on the CV where you actually have to talk about your failures, because we all have them. And I suppose from my own point of view, if I look at myself by the time I got to my early 40s, I was, hugely personally ambitious. And I figured out actually that personal ambition was causing a situation where people around me felt that I was in it for myself rather than for the common good. And that meant that I wasn't as effective as a leader as I might be. And so I had some pretty straight feedback from a very good boss. And at the end of the day, I decided that, I had to move from being a me person to a we person. And when I did that, it was amazing how much more effective I was as a leader, creating a common and shared sense of purpose rather than, thinking about Paul's world. I was thinking about the broader world. And ever since then, that's really been a hallmark of my leadership and management style.
I mean, that's a massive pivotal moment. Did you figure that out yourself, or was it?
I had some 360 feedback, which was pretty bloody clear, and then had a very, very experienced and able coach who was actually able to help me unpack all of that and really think about the changes I needed to make to my management style. And it was that experience, Dave, which then prompted me back in 2012 to go on a program to be a certified practitioner in coaching and leadership development with the Tavistock Institute, which is, if you like, helped me then coach others, both those who work alongside me, but also others at pivotal points in their career. And so, that was a pretty important moment for me. I think I was too ambitious for my own good, and it was actually that was hurting my potential to actually move forward.
Yeah, no, I mean that's sort of sage advice, and I mean presumably that was quite an emotional moment in your life, where the emotions that go with that, going from a me person to a we person, and how you suddenly shift your focus, that must have taken sort of quite a bit of working through.
Well, it did. I mean, they say feedback is the breakfast of champions, don't they? There's that kind of thing. But to be honest with you, nobody really likes getting feedback, particularly when it's in the could do better zone. So I think the first thing is to fundamentally accept that what is being said is true, because we all have our own narrative and we love to spin our own story. But actually, it's what others think and feel that's actually much more important. And I think the biggest difference between the kind of the me and the we is the amount of time that you actually spend listening rather than talking. So going out, listening carefully to what's going on, taking soundings, really getting an understanding of what's happening in your business at a grassroots level, what matters to people rather than what matters to the board. All those things those are just really important things to do. But it takes time and discipline to be able to do that. But you can't decode and change the culture of business until you have really understood what the psychological and emotional drivers are for people who are working in it.
I mean, what sort of age did that happen?
Yeah, I would say that it happened kind of 45.
Yeah.
So I was a bit of a late developer emotionally, I think, to be honest with you.
I'd have said you could be an early developer, because I meet a lot of people in their sort of 30s who are very driven, very ambitious, very much a me person.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of maturity needed to recognize yourself as a we person. And I just wonder what sort of age that, I know it happened to me in my early 40s as well. And I just wonder whether that's a natural, when you really do go from being, a potential leader to a leader. I wonder if
maybe it's a mid-career crisis, a bit like a midlife crisis. You don't go and buy a Porsche or get divorced. You sort yourself out as in terms of what's important to you. And I suppose that's really I've been on a journey since then in terms of really kind of working out and crystallizing what my purpose is. And it's taken me quite some time. I'd say it took another 15 years to land on that. And so my purpose in life is about solving problems and helping people be their best. And if I can find a situation where I'm doing both of those things together, then that is a real sweet spot for me to be not only effective at what I do, but actually really love it.
No, and if you're doing that day in and day out, you're going to be at your happiest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And did you find that sort of shift in your mindset also then resulted in more success in business?
Yeah, it did, because I stopped trying so hard to prove to everybody that I was actually worthy of recognition and success. I just got on with doing the right things in the right way for the collective, creating psychologically safe and trusting environments, which are then productive, and therefore that gets the work done. Particularly when you've got really difficult things that you have to do. One example was at Eircom, the Irish telco, where I was from 2009 to 2012. Which was, I had to take through a kind of Chapter 11 type situation. And I went to the unions and said, look, we are the least efficient telecommunications company in Europe. Our costs are too high. People are going to have to go. But not only that, everybody, and I'm the first person to do it, is going to have to take a 10% pay cut, or we simply won't survive as a business. And the union said to me, well, why should we believe your plan? And I said, well, because here's €25,000 for you to hire a consultant to actually review the plan. They came back 2 weeks later and they said, the guy says the plan's a good one. Let's work it together. We went out on the stump, the union and management, and we passed a 10% pay reduction by a 70-30 majority in a highly unionized environment, because people trusted what we were going to do. They didn't like the news that they got, but they trusted the fact that there was going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. And that for me is a really good example of something that people said could never be done. But when you actually create the right climate for that discussion and engagement, it can be.
I mean, that's an incredible pivotal moment to get the unions to support that. And did that work out for Eircom? I think it's now called Air, isn't it?
Yeah, it's now called Air. So we took we created a plan which would invest €1 billion over 3 years in a new fibre network, and went through a court-led process, kind of the Irish equivalent of Chapter 11, which is called administration, and it's examinership. And we ended up writing down €1.8 billion of debt. So the debt holders, who by that time were owning the company, had to take a very significant haircut for it to survive. So it ended up refinanced with an investment plan, and 2 years later was sold to another private equity company, and is still performing in the marketplace. Whereas it could actually have gone into, it could have failed to exist in any recognizable format. So I think the people collectively recognized that the time had come for them to do the right thing, and we did.
Mm. No, I mean, that's so impressive. And I know you've done 2 or 3 of those major turnarounds, and I know one of the ones you're most proud of is ODEON. And I think as cinema goers, we're all very grateful for what you did there. But talk a little bit about, how you go about, you come into ODEON, it's probably not in a great shape, and you've got a limited amount of time to turn it around. Otherwise, the private equity guys start sort of nibbling at your feet and questioning how long is this going to take. They need to turn it.
So I went into ODEON in early 2014. ODEON UCR Cinemas at that time, Europe's largest cinema operator, with 250 sites in 7 countries across Europe. had been owned by Terra Firma Capital Partners, so Guy Hand's organization, for 10 years, which is a long time in private equity terms. It had been up for sale 3 times and failed each time. And so I was given a brief to turn the business around and sell it in a 3-year period. And I took that on because I wanted to demonstrate that I wasn't just a telecommunications guy and that I could apply my skills in other environments. So, it was a big change for me to go into what was effectively a leisure and hospitality business. So the business had a troubled history. It was badly financed. It was, 5 times levered when I went in. It had a strategy the previous CEO had followed of cost reduction, which is fine until you start cutting costs in the wrong areas. And the business literally had just stalled. It had been through a redundancy program, and it had the wrong ethos and very low levels of employee satisfaction in the bottom quartile. And so by introducing 8 or 9 key people who brought fresh skills and perspectives from the outside, and by identifying another dozen or so in the business who actually had the right attitude and that deep institutional knowledge of the organization about how it really works, we created a kind of change team that over a 3-year period increased market share in 6 of the 7 markets, created a remarkable improvement, a 50% increase in EBITDA. We used the McKinsey Organizational Health Index as the measure of our organization's health. We were at the 30th percentile in 2014, and by 2016, we were at the 95th percentile. So we changed the way that people felt about working in the company. And there's nothing like winning and turning a business around and focusing on customers and doing the right thing in your job to make people feel much more satisfied. But it was a quite astonishing turnaround. And that meant that when we put the business up for sale, we sold at a 70% increase in equity value over that 3-year period to an American company who put ODEON and UCI together with their business in the US, their business AMC, to create the world's largest cinema operator. And they then were able to invest the capital in the business that Guy Hands was not able to do. So it was a great situation where Guy got a great result and got his money. The employees were on an upward curve and things going in the right direction. And the money that the business had been starved of in terms of investment meant that the vast majority of the cinemas in the estate could actually be upgraded to luxury recliner seating and all that kind of thing, which created further improvements in business performance. Since then, COVID came along, of course, and cinemas still operating in a kind of pre-COVID recovery phase, but the business was really in good shape simply by getting 9,000 people to know why they were there and giving them the freedom to get on and do that. So we focused on the customer, we focused on culture, we focused on measuring and rewarding performance, and we focused on partnerships with the studios to make sure that whenever a film came out, we were always at the front of the queue in terms of marketing. So, when Star Wars came out, we'd sold 750,000 tickets in advance, that kind of thing, which, the business never really did. We introduced subscription-based models, so you get a lot of people coming more frequently. So it was great. And by the way, it was probably the funnest job I had in my whole career.
Wow. What made it so much fun?
Because it's different every week. Most businesses, spend a long time on product development, but all of our product really comes from the studios. So you're constantly seeking to optimize. It's a bit like being a greengrocer, actually, where you can only sell what's been grown in that particular season of the year, and you have to optimize that across the number of screens you have and the number of time slots you have and the customers you have in order to maximize your margins. Basically, people got behind a vision that said they wanted to create inspiring entertainment experiences for every guest. So people started thanking people when they left, welcoming them when they came. If there was a mum with 4 kids who only bought 2 popcorns and 2 Coke, we allowed them to give some freebies away. because that was the right thing to do, which makes people feel great. And then we introduced behind that a lot of marketing and data science that meant that we targeted very much every cinema against particular demographics and drove increases in recency and frequency, which basically increased revenues. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. So it was a kind of marketing and culture led recovery rather than the previous strategy of cost reduction, which really had run out of road.
Do you think you know a lot of leaders? Do you think they underestimate that power of mobilizing your employees, engaging with your employees, trusting your employees? And I see so many companies that go down the cost cutting, the sales route, and they just miss the power of their people when they're engaged and they're mobilized and they're excited and they've got a sense of purpose. Do you think we've got more to learn in business about how to deploy that?
I think we have a lot to learn. I mean, the fact that the phrase "quiet quitting" even exists is testament to that, Dave. So look, I don't. It's a bit like no parent sends their child to school hoping that their child's not going to learn. Okay, nobody shows up at work wanting to do a bad day's work. Somehow, though, organizations conspire to a culture where that sometimes can be accepted and tolerated, and where insufficient attention has been paid to what people really care about and what they want to do. And so, everybody has an employment contract, which is the piece of paper with the signatures that needs to go in the drawer. It's the psychological contract between the company and the people who work in it, which is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, culture is what happens when nobody's looking. And when I first went to ODEON, I used to dread Friday night and Saturday night, because about 10:15, people who'd had terrible experiences would find my email address on the internet and write to me to tell me what a terrible company I ran. And and then Guy Hands would get them as well. And he'd send them to me and say, go and sort this out. And so, but I couldn't be in the UK, there are 120 cinemas. I couldn't be in 120 places at once. So what you have to do is you have to work out how you can empower people in your own estate to make sure that those things don't happen. And the really great thing was the number of complaints that I used to get just dropped exponentially when people took responsibility for managing their own site and making sure that customers were really looked after. And if customers complained, we did everything we could possibly do to make it good. And that once people understood that was important, they were emboldened to be able to surprise customers and delight them through lots of different initiatives that we ran that made people feel that going to an ODEON cinema was a good experience.
And do you think that sort of we mentality you developed earlier on, that really translated and helped you get that sort of that taking people with you and making people sort of enabled and empowered?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think you'd have done that if you'd have had the me mentality still?
No, probably not.
Yeah.
But the thing you have to recognize, though, is that there still are some decisions that need to be made by a very small group of people. You believe in it, and therefore you're going to do it. And then what you have to do is you have to reach out and explain change to people. The mistake that most organizations make, in my view, when going through transformation, is they don't spend sufficient time listening and they don't spend sufficient time explaining. And when you do those two things, then actually decisions made centrally that need to be executed in a distributed kind of a way, the whole thing happens much more easily, because people feel they belong and they can see how they are contributing to the whole. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can totally relate to that. I'm going to just sort of come to the last phase of your career and get you to talk a little bit about Artis. I know that's something that you hold very dear. And How did you get involved with Artis, and what are your aspirations for that charity?
So as a venture philanthropist, what you are looking out for are innovative charities that have high potential. So just like when you're looking to invest in early stage businesses, those are the characteristics. And when you're investing in an early stage tech company, you're looking at the idea and you're looking at the management. And if you believe in both of those things, then you put some funds in. And the same is true in the not-for-profit sector. And so I went to a meeting of something called the Funding Network, which by the way, I commend to everybody as an easy way into philanthropy. It's a kind of a dragon's den where 5 times a year, 3 charities pitch, and you can give from £5 to £5,000, depending on your degree of interest and your financial capability. Artists were there, and I was very interested in them. And so I made a donation, and I helped get that doubled on the evening. So they were very pleased with the outcome. And so I rang the CEO, who's an incredible lady called Rebecca Boylser, and went to find out more about the way that artists operate. And what artists have been over the last 20 years is a kind of arts-based education business, which trains specialists into schools for a day a week through year 1 through 6, actually bringing the curriculum to life through song, through music, through dance, all the things that have been eradicated almost completely from the school agenda. And I went to a presentation at the Royal School of Arts from Pro Bono Economics that showed that there was a £32 benefit to society for every pound spent on artists. The problem is, after 20 years, Artis was in only 60 schools in the UK, and there are 20,000 primary schools. And so I went to Rebecca and said, look, if we could take this online and have a digital version, a kind of Netflix of creative learning, we could actually change the way that teaching is delivered in schools. And she said that's really interesting, because during COVID, a lot of our specialists couldn't go into schools, and so they did iPhone videos of themselves, and we carried on measuring the effect of that, and it was almost as effective as them being there in person. And so for the last 18 months, we've been building a technology platform and creating content, which is now being piloted in 20 schools across the UK, pending going national with the launch of that next year. And if that happens, it will be one of the things I'm probably proudest of, not just in my philanthropic work, but in my career, because I believe it will be genuinely transformational for education, and something that's really sorely needed. And kudos to you, Dave, for helping them with their brand identity and their look and feel as well, which has been an enormous enhancement to what we've been doing. So thank you for that, Brandpie.
It's been our pleasure, and I sense with everything you've achieved in life, it will probably happen. We just need to get this current government on board and get them supporting it as well, I guess.
I hope so. And I think that during the election, education was not on the manifesto list at all. But Bridget Phillipson does seem to have got the bit between her teeth and really wanting to go and create some change. And so, hopefully we can be a small but important part of that as we go forward.
No, well, fingers crossed for that. We've sort of come to the end of our time, and I'm going to let you sign us out, right, because I know that a little known fact is that you did your degree in Scandinavian studies and speak fluent Swedish. And I know you have some very dear friends in Sweden who I'm sure are going to be listening to this podcast at some point in time.
I very much doubt that, Dave.
I bet they will. I'm going to let you sign us out in Swedish and say a nice little hello to your friends in Scandinavia.
Hallå pojkar i Linköping i Sverige. Jag hoppas att ni har lyssnat på denna podcast och ni har tagit något från det.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brandpie and how we deliver impact in those pivotal business moments, the moments that matter to you, head over to brandpie.com. And at the same time, check out our latest CEO report. There's lots to read and lots to learn. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.